Greetings, neighbors. This is Reflections, a show sponsored by the Paducah Cooperative Ministry where we, all of us together, do God's work with human hands. My name's Gregory Waldrop, and I'm the pastor at Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church, and I'm one of your co-hosts. Your other co-host is Karen Winkel, pastor at the United Church of Paducah. Welcome, Karen.
Good to see you, Gregory, and good to have you with us on a special program where we focus on really God's work in an amazing way in New Orleans. And with us here today is Brother Vance Moore from the Westside Mission Center in New Orleans, and Reverend Jae Gottman, who's the pastor at First Christian Church here in Paducah, who invited Brother Vance. Brother Vance, tell us about what's happening in New Orleans and how you got there.
Well, we first of all, thank you for having me, and we've been here about a week, and we've really enjoyed being in Paducah. And the reason that I'm in Paducah is part of the story of that you're asking me to tell, because so many of the members, or quite a few of the members of the Disciple Church here in Paducah, came down and became a part of a mission team that came to New Orleans to try and help after the rebuilding of Katrina. But Hurricane Katrina hit 3 years ago, going on 4 years ago now, at the end of August. And as a result of that, the Disciples of Christ decided to commit to a mission center in New Orleans that would be a part of the rebuilding effort. And what we try to do there is to give people a hand up, not a handout. There are many, many people there. I work specifically in the lower Ninth Ward. Our mission center is in the city of New Orleans. It's on the West Bank in the part called Algiers, which is one of the older sections of New Orleans. But the work that we do, even though there's damage still over the entire city, and so many people don't realize that, we tend to be a people who like sound bites and short things, and we like for things to be over.
Right.
In New Orleans.
Quick.
Yeah, in New Orleans, the recovery is going to take 12 to 15 years. Yeah. And so what we decided to do is we developed this mission center, was to concentrate in the lower Ninth Ward and to take one family at the time and to rehouse them. And we go in and we take their house in whatever condition it's in. We let them bring in the resources that they have available. And we use those resources until they're exhausted. So in essence, they buy the materials and we do the labor. And to date, we've brought in about 3,500 volunteers from all over the United States, from several different denominational backgrounds that come in. Most groups come in, get to the Mission Center on Sunday night, and we have an orientation process where I do something similar to what we're doing here and let them know what we're going to do and meet the people and just get comfortable. And then the next morning we get up and we go to work. And we take people from every background that's imaginable, and most of which are not tradespeople, most of which are not construction people. Right. We have doctors and lawyers and school teachers and nurses and you name it. And we go out into the community. We work on, we say we work on one house at a time, but in essence I have to work on about 6 because they'll be in various stages of construction. But the objective is to take the house from the destroyed position that it had at the beginning of the process. And when we finish, we move them in the house so that they're able to become a viable part of the community again.
Mm. And this is in the Ninth Ward. That's where your work is.
Yeah, the lower Ninth Ward. Now, there's still damage all over the city.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
but it was so overwhelming, Greg. I mean, during Katrina, there were like 90,000 houses in New Orleans itself. Now, in the entire area that was affected by Katrina, there's like 235,000 homes that were rendered uninhabitable, right, from Moss Point, Mississippi to Beaumont, Texas. But my particular piece of the pie, if you will, was in the New Orleans area. And I chose to take a specific area and concentrate my efforts there so that we could maximize our ability to just try to do part of the process.
Sure, sure. And you work all with homeowners now, no churches. I know there were plenty of churches destroyed. I know there were community buildings that were wiped out. but you're all do home.
Well, yeah, yes and no, because back in April of this year, up to that point, we had done only homeowners. And as we became more known and got to know a lot of the people in the lower Ninth Ward, it became obvious to us that virtually none of the churches were coming back. And part of that was because only homeowners got the rebuild money through the FEMA through the rebuild program. So we located a church, a little small Baptist, African American Baptist church, the Greater New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church. It's a big long name, but it was just a small little community church that before the storm worshiped about 60 on Sunday. And we started working with them because they got no resources. And we have now reopened that church as of the middle of August. And what we're doing today is helping to bring the members of that church back home. Many of those members are still in cities as far away as Houston or Paducah or just spread all over the United States. They want to come home, but they don't have a place to live because they lost their home. So we're searching and locating and through the discernment process, choosing the ones that are the most needy. And we're bringing them back one at a time and helping them to rehouse in a house. So we're trying now to look into working with the community through the churches so that we're doing two things at the same time. We're helping to rebuild the church and we're helping to rehouse the community at the same time. So.
Now, Jay, you've had some folks from your church go down and participate in this effort.
Right.
Talk about that a
We've had probably 5 out of our 7 mission trips have all been down to New Orleans and to the area affected by Katrina and Rita, and 3 of the 4 have been to Brother Vance's Westside Mission Center, and it's a fantastic setup. He's got room and bunks for 50 people at a time. There's a kitchen facility so that all the groups can come in and cook their own food, showers, bathrooms, everything is right there, and so it's a great opportunity. The mission trip I got to go on was this past January, and we were helping, his name was Willie, finish up his home. A group had come in before us and they had gotten the place rebuilt and drywalled, and our mission team got to sand all the walls. And that's what we did for 3.5 days, was sand and sand and sand and sand and get it ready so that the next group could come in and paint. And the great thing about it was we got to meet the homeowner throughout that week and spend some time with him. And it was distressing to hear how long he'd been out of his home.
Yeah.
And he was about the only one in his block, I believe, who was getting back into his home. And so if you think of all those people who were displaced, and it'd been 2 years at the time, and he's just now getting back into his home, getting back to his job, getting back to some sense of normalcy, but everywhere around him, it is still torn up and still uninhabited. So it's just overwhelming, but the hope is that, like Vance said, you get to see one person at a time or one family at a time begin to experience some hope and see some hope in the community. And so that's the beauty of the Mission Center. And we plan on going back again this year, at least a couple trips, to help with the rebuilding effort.
Yeah, the really neat thing that I would like to be able to convey to people is there's more than one aspect to this. I mean, there's the aspect of helping people that lost it all. I mean, and if you can get your mind around, which is extremely difficult to do, that today you have your home that you've had in some cases for several generations, and then tomorrow there's nothing. There's not even pictures of mom and dad who are now with Jesus, and you don't have any pictures anymore because they went 14 feet underwater. So there's that aspect of the people that desperately need a hand up, not a handout. They're people that were hardworking people. They had a job. They had, they were just living life, and then in one day all of that's gone, and that's the thing that we focused on, and there's a large part of what I do that says thanks for letting me come so I can tell the people of Paducah it ain't over yet, by a long shot. Right. But there's this other side that allows you and me and thousands of other church folk to come down and truly be brothers and sisters in Christ, truly live out who we are as a people. Right. And I can't share with you enough this thing about, looking in somebody's eyes and seeing that blank look that says, I just want to go home.
Hopeless.
Yeah. And you at first you look and you say, well, this is hopelessness. But then as you look, all of a sudden you see that it's not. There's hope there. And then God has put us there and said, come together. We're a people. And if you'll allow me to work through you, then these great things are going to be done. And all of a sudden, and I didn't come here to preach to you, but all of a sudden, the word starts coming alive, because, and I remember a poem, and I wish I was good enough to memorize the poem that Edgar Guest wrote about, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. The people like Jae and the church here, the churches all over the United States, have come down, and it's so impressed them. I really wish that you could come and see the inside of this mission center where they stay and see that the walls are covered with crosses, that these volunteers came in and they build a cross and they sign this cross and they write their heartfelt feelings on this cross and they leave it hanging on the walls. And there's so many of them hung now that I don't have any place to hang them anymore. Mm. Or how at the end of the day, we go out and we work and it's amusing because, if you ever want your house sanded for sheetrock, here's your man.
Hey, okay? Well done.
But you take people that aren't used to working physically hard. They go out and they work hard all day. Then we come back into the mission center, we get a shower, we have supper, and then we sit down and I crawl up on a stool and I say, I got a question for you. And the question is this: where did you see God today? Mm-hmm. And then you hear people with tears in their eyes pour their hearts out over things that you and I would think are just average, everyday. Yeah. I saw a bird today, which we didn't have very many after the storm. Mm. But it's such a transforming experience. And then to see these people leave and then come back to their home church and then begin to go out in their community and do things because that level of awareness that we're all in this thing together. Yeah. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. And where would that restoration process be without the religious community down there? I mean, we all know the fiasco about the government interactions, but they got in there eventually and provide a lot of things. But where in the world would 80% of the folks be down there without the faith community's response?
And I'm really glad that you asked that question, and I want to answer that question from a positive hope perspective. I believe that if we looked historically at what happened with the government, that if you try to be totally fair to the government, we never had a tragedy this big before. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing that we had before Katrina was Hurricane Andrew down in Homestead, Florida, and they lost 32 or 33,000 homes. Here we come with Katrina, we lost 235,000 homes. So even if they had been equipped to do it, which I don't think that they were, they would have been overwhelmed with the process. But the beautiful thing, I mean, Greg, there's not words to describe church folk showing up and I'm talking about, and just like in my mission center, I've had elderly people, men and women, show up and say, I don't think I can do anything, but I could not stay home. I had to come, and then these people end out in Willie's house, ladies that are in their 70s and they're over there sanding sheetrock and they're toting trash out and they're painting and they're doing all those things that it takes to put a man's home back together. Mm-hmm. So that's the individual answer to your question. The bigger answer to your question is that were it not for the people of God, were it not for the church people, we wouldn't be anywhere in New Orleans. Right. I work in the lower 9th Ward. There were 14,000 people there before the storm, And regardless of what you hear, I'll work there every day. If we can find 1,000 of them today, we couldn't get them all together. Okay? So there's tons and tons and tons of work. And there are some people like Brad Pitt's Village. It's beginning to happen and it looks good. It's a great thing. But if you took and pulled out the work that the churches have done in the lower Ninth Ward, it would look like it did 60 days after Katrina.
Right.
So.
Right. And I was there just, 6 or 8 months afterwards, and that work was the work of pulling out old wet mattresses and magazines and piling it up, and then stripping the house bare and getting all the little nooks and crannies showing so you could get the mold. See, and then spraying it down with the Clorox kind of solution, and then after it sits 3 or 4 days, after you've done all this work, have the inspector come in and say, it's still infected with mold, tear it down. So you've done this whole amount of work, and it wasn't easy work, and it was it had a lot of times we didn't have homeowners around. Sometimes they'd be there in the trailers for sure, handy, and you would meet them somewhere, of course, of the week. But some people were, like you say, scattered all over the Southeast and at homes and with neighbors and that sort of thing. So I agree with you. I think the church's response here has been so important and significant.
Yes. Amen.
You were talking a little bit about kind of the what I'll call the sneaky side of mission trips, which is that it really ministers to the people who are going to offer a helping hand. It helps change them in ways that they wouldn't have expected. They're going thinking they're going to give something, and they get something in return. And I'm wondering, Jae, if you've seen ways in which that trip to the Westside Mission Center has brought about some change in your membership or in your congregation. Do you sense that?
Sure. One of the things we've been working on for several years at First Christian is getting more mission oriented, that we need to be outside the church walls. We need to be practicing and doing what the gospel tells us to be doing. And so these mission trips have really opened us up to my little bit. My contribution somewhere else does make a difference, and it makes a difference in somebody else's life, which is what we're trying to do and preach and practice each and every day. And some of the neat things that have happened are people come back from the trips and they're excited and they're ready to take new people with them back to the mission station to do work. They see things around our community that need to be done, and so they get organized and they help out in that way. We even have one woman who has really experienced a deeper call to ministry just beyond being a lay member in the church, feeling a call to maybe professional ministry or some form of ministry that's more full-time for her. So, I mean, it can bring out a whole range of emotions. I really have seen people become more politically active because of it, because of the way things were handled or not handled. People feel like they need to have their voice heard by those who represent us in the government, and let them know what's expected. And if it weren't for the churches, how bad things would be.
Yeah.
And so I've seen just tons of examples from our small congregation of how it really does change one's outlook on life, and how we're less focused on ourselves after that. And we're thankful for a roof and a warm bed and food, and that we have people who care about us right here in our community.
Right. When that word really does become flesh, it really matters, doesn't it?
Amen.
Somebody said the church spend too much time taking the flesh and putting it back into the Word, but these mission trips really make you live it out, doesn't it?
Exactly.
In every way.
I do.
Well, it's obvious to me, Brother Vance, that you have a pastor's heart, but I'm thinking you must have kind of workman's hands, because you have to know some things, not just how to organize people. I mean, do you have some background in building and?
Well, I'm a late life pastor,
Okay.
and in part of my other life, I was a home builder.
Okay.
So I have a little bit of experience, and but having said that, And it's good that I have that experience so I can kind of guide the process. But if you could step into the sanctuary at my church, which was rebuilt by volunteers, it is without a doubt one of the most beautiful it's a small church, but it's one of the most beautiful sanctuaries that you have ever seen. And with pride, I tell people that with the exception of the electrical, which had to be done by a licensed person, and the plumbing, which had to be done by a licensed person, everything else in that sanctuary was done by nurses and doctors and lawyers and pastors and associate pastors and kids, you know. You were talking about the people, and as you were talking about the people that come down, it made me think about the kids, because so much of what happens on TV today is just negative toward especially teenagers. And I was thinking about a UCC group of kids from Salem, Oregon. Salem, Oregon is a long way from New Orleans. And I got a call a couple of years ago from the youth pastor at this particular church wanting to know if she could bring some teenagers down. And I said, well, sure. And it didn't cross my mind that they were going to have to drive using teams of drivers. They were going to have to drive 3 vans, 36 hours straight to get there. They had to raise their own money to pay for it. They drove 36 hours. They stayed 4 days and worked their hearts out. Turned around and drove back another 36 hours. And you know, if the story ended there, it would be wonderful. But that was year 1. The second year, I get the phone call that says, we got to come back. You know, we got to come back. We got to come back and help. And they named off the people that they had helped and said, we know that they're in now, but there was somebody next door and we want to come back and we want to be a part of the process, you know, because where did you see God today is something that has been a part of our lives every day since we left, you know. And the only difference was this year they raised enough money to fly down so they would have more time to work in the lower Ninth Ward, you know. And if that's not God working, if that's not getting the flesh out, then I don't know what is, you know. And it's not just, I'm passionate and I'm proud of Westside Mission Center, but the Methodist, there's a big operation across on the north side of the lake where the Methodists as a denomination have rebuilt hundreds of houses, you know. But again, it's the church, it's the church, it's the church. It's the disciples, it's the Methodists, it's UCC, the Catholics have a big presence there. Right. I mean, it is the faith community answering the call of God, and it is beautiful.
You know, when I was there, one of the things that sort of happened accidentally, not accidentally, very few accidents in the world, but there were some folks who, in the course of cleaning things out of the attic and that sort of thing, homeowners would want to show them the pictures and start talking and remembering and reminiscing, and all of a sudden their job, they didn't get near as much sanding of the sheetrock done because the homeowner wanted to talk about what happened over here and what happened over there. I'm sure that's a part of the work too.
You know, Greg, it really is. I recall, in fact, Jay and I were talking about this the other day, that when I first went down, I heard the phrase PTSD, and I've heard about post-traumatic stress, and to be honest with you, I didn't have the best opinion of post-traumatic stress. I thought, well, I don't know what I thought, but once I began to see what happened to the people of New Orleans, and one of the really neat things, in fact, one of the things I do in my orientation process on Sunday night is to make sure, you know, you need to understand, do I want to get the work done? Yes, but that's not what this is about. This is a mission trip. And what's a mission trip about? It's about God. And so as the volunteers go out, if that homeowner wants to stop and talk or needs to stop and talk, they do, you know, and it benefits everybody. I mentioned a minute ago this church that we did. This particular church, the pastor is a fellow, he's 81 years old, and his name is Howard Washington, and he's pastored this little church for 44 years. And the whole time we worked on his church, we get there with the crew. In fact, I would normally try to get there ahead of the crew because he and I would have a little sit down every morning. But when the volunteers get there in the morning, the first thing Pastor does is he comes over and he puts everybody in a circle and he has a prayer. And then during the day, you'll see a little group here or a little group there, and they'll have him off to the side and they sit and they ask him questions about what happened. And as I watched that, I saw healing on his side, but I saw transformation on their side. So yeah, that's a very important part of this whole process.
That's neat. It's getting close to this 30 minutes being over, so make sure we know that the Westside Mission Center in Algiers, is that the
Algiers.
address? What the best way to connect with you? Maybe through Jae here or with
You know,
is there a
I think
website?
the best way, because we try to do these things as a community effort. If anyone is interested in coming to help, get in touch with Jay here at the local church.
First Christian Church.
First Christian Church here in Paducah. And you know, we try to put groups together. Want to make sure that everybody knows that you don't have to be a disciple or a Methodist or a UCC to come down. And I mentioned earlier, I've had a Buddhist down. You just have to have a desire to be a part of something that's a little bigger than yourself. And anybody that wants to can get in touch with Jay, and we'll see to it that they have the opportunity to come down.
Cost for the week, generally speaking, what do you?
You know, up through where we are right now, we've been able, because of different groups making donations, we've been able to not charge. Do we need money to operate? Yes. But I try to make sure that everybody understands nobody is not going to come down because of money. You know, then having said that, most groups raise money and try to bring, because people exhaust their funds.
Sure.
And then we have to kind of build to it. So.
Right. And our mentality at First Christian is, if you want to go on the mission trip, since you're taking vacation time or you're taking time away from your family or whatever you have going on in your life, we really try and make it little to no expense for anybody that goes through our mission groups. So we try and make it as cost effective as possible.
Wonderful. Well, we could spend another 30 minutes talking. It's clear that God's called you to an important work, Brother Vance, and so thank you for coming, and thank
very
you,
much.
Jay, also
Thank you.
for inviting Brother Vance and sharing him with us and with you. Thank you for joining us today at Reflections. Please join Paducah Cooperative Ministry wherever you can, however you can, in doing God's work with human hands. Shalom.
Shalom.
In mission together.